I'm Allison. I'm an early childhood educator in Richmond, BC. Well, the other day I tried starting a Facebook group for my apartment neighbors, and it was the first time I did something like that. And so far 5 people have joined, and that's pretty exciting.
My name's Vera, and I live near Trout Lake. Evan invited me to this call, and I want to start a neighborhood pod for my block. I'm quarantining solo.
Not much to say. I live in Dunbar. I work at a liquor store in Richmond, and I write. I'm not able to quarantine because I'm still working full time, and my store is not closing. So,
I'm Tèa. I'm a student of social sciences at Langara, and Evan invited me because I've started a pod in our neighborhood, and we knew each other before, and then I dropped the flyer off at Evan's house.
Nice.
So we've reconnected, and yeah, I'm really excited about that.
It's Evan. I work at a hardware store, which is still open, and the warehouse where I work is mostly closed off to customers. But it's kind of odd because everyone else is either working from home or being quarantined, and there's hardware stores because people might need to get.
Not everyone else, Evan.
Not everyone else. Sorry, Taylor. Apparently, hardware stores and liquor stores are essential services. So
people would rather drink than live.
Yeah. So
that's not a joke.
I'm in Tèa's Neighbourhood Pod, and also on this channel. So wrap them together.
I'm in Burnaby. As far as I can tell, there is no neighborhood pod here. There's a very small group of folks maybe on the internet that are kind of organizing around it, but it's time for me to, I think, to start doing what Tèa is doing, what Evan is involved in, and now what everybody else is excited about to be able to do to help each other. With that being said, how to start a neighborhood pod. I think this is a good time for us to go to Tèa and kind of, if you can explain to us, or kind of tell us about your experience while you were starting your neighborhood pod.
Yeah, so it's super fresh. I got the idea because of a document posted in the Coming Together Vancouver Facebook page. And that document is related to the one that we're talking about now, the how to start. That one's like a Canada General one. A lot of them, there was a really amazing one that came out, I think, from somewhere called Somerville. And then, yeah, so they've all been kind of, like, these documents have been, like, really informed and reinforced by each other. So I took that as my guidelines. And I started by flyering because I wanted to be able to get in touch with people virtually to stay physically apart. And then also phone calls with neighbors who don't use online stuff, which is definitely helpful because that is more common around older people who need more protected and cautious support. So we're now online. We're using email and Facebook and possibly WhatsApp. And then phone calls with some people who that's a better fit for.
So were you at all concerned that, like, if you had COVID, then the flyers could have COVID, and then you would have to, like, quarantine the flyers?
I was, yeah. So because of that, I distributed them with gloves. Of course, there is, like, a huge chance, that I have it and I'm asymptomatic. And so that was why that was really important. I considered just putting them up on street posts or just getting in touch with people electronically.
So what did the flyers say? Was there, like, call me and I'll connect you, or was it, like, join our Facebook group, or both?
Mm-hmm.
Both those things.
So it was basically like, hi, I live here, blank, because Like I wanted to create the familiarity and like confidence kind of. And then what it was, really brief examples of what the group could be used for, and then contact me, and I put my email and my phone number, and then later I actually made the group.
Yeah.
So the Facebook I wish I had the Facebook on it initially, but I hadn't made it yet, so.
Okay, when you delivered the flyers, did you knock on people's doors and explain it to them, or did you just leave them?
I decided not to knock on doors because I thought that would be too easily violate the like distancing. But there were a couple people out on their porches where I feel like the conversation is helpful. It was helpful in those cases that I was able to have the conversation, but no, I decided to just leave them in mail slots and mailboxes.
If folks are ready, we can like open up the document if you have access to it already. I like the fact that they have joined a group as one of the first options, because I think it's probably a good idea for us to not be duplicating efforts, rather working as a single organism to a certain extent in neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
They've set up maps, and what I mean is that it's kind of like a layer that they've set up on Google Maps. So when you go through the document, the first thing is you can actually access that map, and on the left-hand side it shows it's kind of like a legend. I know I can see that there's one in Vancouver Island. There's folks' names attached to it. So you, as a captain, take on a pod, and a pod could be a single block. It could be 2 blocks. But the best thing about this is that you're able to mark it on the map, and you can find other people. What I'm learning right now is that don't duplicate. Go to the map first. It's beautiful to look at to begin with, and find people around you. And if there isn't one in your neighborhood, start one.
Yeah.
It's really kind of neatly organized, and there's this section called Elements of a Neighborhood Pod. And I like that they've set it like so clearly out. List of community neighbors, so their contact info for their needs and what they can offer. This kind of allows you to triage if you need to, right? It also provides you a way to like match people. Sometimes a way for people to connect directly with each other to offer support, connection, and solidarity. Those are the 3 elements, right? So in terms of these elements, Tèa, were you finding that most folks prefer to be called or emailed, or?
It definitely varied. I found email was the most popular.
Okay.
I do think that the calling is really essential though, because one thing that I found while setting up was that I emailed a lot of people, but the people that I was able to call, or that I got in touch with by phone, or that got in touch with me by phone, were the ones where I got a better understanding of their living situation, of what they might need now, what they might need going forward, what they might be able to offer. So I think I would definitely say that calling is really important, and and just maintaining like your social interaction, and your mental health in that way. Generally, to answer your question more directly, emailing was the most popular.
So one of the sections in here talks about how you should make sure that you have support before you start supporting other people. And this is something, if I told my dad, he'd be like, told you so. Because I generally kind of forget sometimes. I know a lot of folks in my life, a lot of organizers I know tend to forget this. They kind of put their needs aside, and I can tell you this, if you're not mentally capable of keeping up with the pressure, these are trying times, and unfortunately things are about to get worse. So you need to make sure that we support ourselves first.
So I'm thinking like we got pods, and we got the network of pods,
Yes.
right? And then the network can be like, oh hey, we have a big empty gap on the map. Someone go make a pod there.
Looking at the map, you're able to see the other captains. I think you can reach out to these folks. So I have a question. How was it? How is it so far? I don't know how old your pod is.
Less than a week.
Less than a week.
Yeah.
Okay, so it might be a little premature to ask this question, but has it been what's that word? Amicable? You know? Do you know what I mean?
Hugely, like hugely, and again, like especially with the people that I've gotten to have phone calls with, that's where I would describe it that way the most. Like this one really great neighbor, we found out that I knew their son. They told me all about their cats that wander around the neighborhood. So you do find these like connections. And the other thing that I'll say is that one thing that I really love about it is so many of the emails to and from me are signed off with like, I hope I get to meet you in person one day. And like probably that never would have happened otherwise. You know?
That is so sweet.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
And there's a lot of tips and lessons. There's a whole section about health and safety. Practicing social distancing is very important, remembering that. There is a form that you can fill out as well, which I think you definitely should.
All right, so tip number 1 is to practice social distancing. So, you know,
Wait. Tip number 1 of what?
Tips and lessons for health and safety. Number 1, practice social distancing. So don't interact face to face. Use the phone or internet instead if you're dropping off food or medicine for a neighbor. Phone or text them to let them know that you have dropped the stuff off. In our pod, has anyone requested drop-offs yet for something?
Yeah, my mom did one today. So far, there's been way more offers to help than requests for help, which is cool because we're so willing, and I love that. But yeah, there has been one, and so that came into play there. Like the stuff gets dropped off on the porch, so that there's no like knocking on the door and then opening the door and you're close. You just drop it off on the porch, and then the person comes to get it later. And that was how that worked in that situation, that it had to be done here.
The second point here says go to the grocery store and pharmacies for essential errands and not non-peak hours.
Yes.
So I actually am completely unaware of peak and non-peak hours.
I was just going to say, yeah, what's
Vaguely, no.
Oh, because you work at the liquor store.
Which may be slightly different.
I mean, liquor store peak hours could be different from pharmacies and grocery
One
stores,
that's going to be universal, though, was sort of like 5 to 6 when people get off work. There was a rush, and it's probably universal.
Yeah.
I mean, right now everyone's out of work, so.
Yeah, but there is a rush at that time.
Okay.
Enough people get off work to cause a rush.
Yeah.
And then for me, there's like another one. For us, there's like another one like around 8, because that's when people are going out for the night, so they're getting their booze. I don't know if that's probably not gonna happen if you go the other. Definitely not the pharmacy, but.
I wonder though, like if people go at non-peak hours, do we have like new peak hours?
That's a very good question.
Well, next time you go to the grocery store, ask them what their peak hours have been during COVID-19 crisis.
Awesome.
I'm there.
I was going to go get mushrooms today, but I couldn't get it because it was a line.
I have mushrooms if you want some. But you're far from me, so.
What kind of mushrooms?
Oh. You need a neighborhood pod, my friend.
Well, the next tip for safety and health is to down and disinfect or wash with soap everything you bring into your home. So if there's something you can't disinfect, like cloth or fabric or paper bags, it says that you can set it aside for a duration of time. The virus can last for 3 days on plastics, 48 hours on stainless steel, and 24 hours on cardboard.
What about on glass?
What about glass? It doesn't say.
Because I think one thing I'm going to keep myself sane is getting like bottles of wine, which are glass. Actually, that's really something I should know.
Can I just say that even though these numbers and this is in here, we don't want people to consider this to be like factual information. Do your own research because we are not
Yes.
experts.
No.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, well, just double check everything we're saying here because it just says like if you have something that can't be disinfected like plastic, fabric, or paper, set aside for like a period of time and like what for fabric, what is a period of time? Anywhere from like 5 minutes to 8 days. We don't know. So please look that up.
Could conceivably wash fabric well enough.
Yeah. Right. That is also true, but they should have put that in here.
Well, listen, I'm not going to say that they haven't done a good job with this, but I will say that it's coming together as we're developing news is coming out.
Of course. Well, one thing I like about this is in this document, which I have a link to, is if you open it and you look, there's a section where you can email them tips for updating the documents. So yes, it's a collaborative effort, and it is very good.
There's like over 53 people on this document currently, so like that makes me happy.
And now it's 58. I think we might be like 6 of them.
What's next?
We should be able to disinfect glass. Wash food in food containers with soap when possible. Digital payments instead of cash where possible. Washing your hands with soap and hot water for 20 seconds before and after each delivery. When dropping off flyers or food, wear protective gloves if you have them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my hands on gloves because I haven't seen them in a while.
I mean, latex gloves. Other gloves might work. I know I have a friend in Burlington, Vermont, who actually I should probably tap on the shoulder about this, even though it's the United States. He's bought his own,
They need it.
that work on touch screens, and they're apparently safe. So if you find out what gloves are safe, because people are buying up the latex ones, doesn't mean there aren't alternatives that are also fine.
Also, folks that take their gloves off and then put them back on, it doesn't leave much room for failure here. Once you put those gloves on, keep them on until you're back home after delivery. Don't touch nothing else. Don't touch your phone. So don't touch your phone. Just keep that in mind. Don't touch your phones.
Yeah. It also says the last tip is privacy is important. So reassure people that their contact info won't be shared publicly. Just ask people, what they're comfortable sharing and build your way that's considered of their privacy boundaries.
I was just going to say something that one of the neighbors brought up, and it kind of ties all of the safety things together and is something that I'm, as I update our pod guidelines and things I'm incorporating in, is basically this neighbor shared a study with us that had been done in Italy, in one of the really heavily affected areas, and it just spoke to the huge amount of people who tested positive but were asymptomatic. And so in reflection of that study and that information, I'm updating our pod guidelines to say just do all of these things as though you are already sick. So when you're washing your hands with soap, remember that is because you need to be acting as though you could possibly be positive with it.
You may very well be.
Yeah, rephrase that is act as though you probably are sick, not as you could be very well be just word it that way because it's a lot sterner and more accurate.
This part right here accurately defines this whole episode's title, Organizing in a Pandemic. You have to just, like everyone said, pretend you got it. And you're the lucky one that isn't in a bed on a ventilator. You're lucky, but that's why you need to spread it to others. Not spread it to others. Spread the joy and cheer and help to others.
Like,
Spread the groceries.
The groceries.
Not the, yeah.
Don't spread the virus. Great. But this next part is my favorite because it's about communication and group dynamics. And I love that the beginning, the first point is like setting norms. And like it's the hard thing to do, but it's like really important to like bring everybody on the same page, right? And if you need to, you might need to break it into smaller groups. Sometimes it's easier for us to just be like, nope, we can just rush through this and we'll get there. You know, we might not have the perfect dynamics right now, but we'll get there. Maybe take a step back and reassess that, because this is not a race by any means, and if it was, it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon. This flattening of the curve means that it will last longer, but less people will get sick at a certain period of time, putting a lot of pressure on our healthcare system and other services, overwhelming the whole system. And boom, that's why we need to flatten the curve. Stay home, please. But yeah, set norms so people have clear expectations. People know how to kind of hold themselves in that space when they're communicating with each other. And we've talked about this before, but there might be folks that are not familiar with the technological aspect of this organizing that we have to do. The platforms we're using, people may not be familiar with them. And if we need to help someone, that's another thing to think about when you're, getting in contact with folks over the phone or email or whichever means, just not face to face. You want to be able to offer them help and really pick up the slack. Be clear with your expectations. I know I overextend myself sometimes, but I've been better at letting people know that no, I can't. And it's very important that we know our own expectations so other people know them as well. Honesty is very important, because in this moment, if somebody says that they need your help and you say yes, but you can't, and you think you're overextending yourself, you're not only going to maybe hurt yourself, but you might put somebody else in jeopardy as well. So let's be honest with ourselves and each other. Don't spam your group. I cannot stress this enough. I've seen this on so many groups, and like so many well-intended groups. Everyone's trying to do their best. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, signal boosting is like the thing. I'll click that share button, and now I've done my duty. Or maybe they're like, I need everyone to know this information. No, they really don't need to know whatever you're going to send or share. What they do need to know is if you can provide them the support that they're asking for. It's not selfish. It's desperation. It's necessity. We're here for each other.
Information relevant. It's like rules for like writing well. It's my own. Well, you don't want this stuff with everything that comes to mind. You want to make it concise and understandable and easy to get through and find the information that's needed, not the kitchen sink and that squirrel over there kind of thing. Outreach. Okay. Translate your flyers. I like that. We're a multicultural society. Not everyone's going to have a great grasp of English, especially depending on the neighborhood.
That whole connecting your community part and creating those networks to fill in the gaps. I think Vera was the one talking about this earlier. I think it's important because we're always thinking to ourselves like, well, somebody else is already working on this, because there's so much support going around. But I think in this case, and in a lot of cases actually, let's not perpetuate the bystander. What is it called? Bystander
effect.
Yes. The word effect. There's resources and templates here as well, and you can add resources by emailing. There's an email here. I'm not gonna say it out loud there. If you're interested in wanting to start a neighborhood pod, you'll come across it. There's outreach letters, there's templates and translations for them. There's community care templates. There's templates for Halifax and Toronto. There's forms and spreadsheets, how to use instructions for community response. Caremongering, Toronto has their support offer form there. It auto populates a spreadsheet, and people can get in touch with you once you fill it out. There's regional pod how-to documents, and these documents are locally tailored and more detailed. They also include scripts and intro to conversations. So I see like there's one for Peel, there's one for Parkdale pods, there's an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Mutual Aid 101. We got our blog guide book. And you know what? In this moment that you're sitting at home and unable to go out and with all this time on your hand, I would give these a pretty good read. There's some organizing tools here that will probably serve us well in this time, and then on the other side.
Go over, use you've got a random selection of neighbors from different generations and backgrounds, so don't assume they know how to use an app, and maybe use a Zoom call or send them an email about how to use different websites like WhatsApp, Facebook, or whatever kind of email you're using. And the second thing, for all the volunteers who are helping, make sure maybe over a phone call, go through all the safety tips that you're using in your pod, especially so you can communicate for the people who are getting grocery deliveries, and they're clear, they clearly understand and have expectations that are in place for how their groceries have been treated, so they know that they've been treated safely by whoever delivering them. So,
actually, this is a good time for us to ask Allison how well she feels about this guide and about neighborhood pods. If she feels like she got a lot of information or too much information or not enough information.
I think I came across this document yesterday. I think so. I did look through it a bit, but I actually found it after I had kind of started my group, I suppose, and had already kind of like put flyers out. So there is a few things in here that I hadn't totally considered yet, which is good. Yeah, I'm wondering, like, can Trust Your Building be a pod? Because, like, we have 30 units in my apartment building, and it's like, is that enough for it to be a pod?
Oh, I think, well, I'll tell you this. In the guide, it says that your pod can be anywhere between 5 and 30. So, yeah. But honestly, I think at some point, we also have to consider our ability to manage the pod. Some folks may have an easier time than others managing a pod of 30. Some folks might even be able to manage like a 50 pod. But ultimately, I think you should start identifying folks that can assist you with managing a pod, to take on some of the responsibilities, connecting folks, and the coordination of it all. But largely, I feel that I don't know, you work with kids and you probably can deal with a million things at a time.
Maybe. We'll see. So far, only about 5 people have gotten back to me about it, so like it's quite manageable at this time. Yeah, like what I did was I printed some flyers, and then they had like a Facebook group link and like my phone number on them. And then I went around trying to slip them underneath people's doors, like of their apartments, but some of them it did work because there was enough of a gap, but some of them they didn't. So I just kind of like left it on the floor in front of their door, and I'm kind of hoping at some point come out and get it. And then I guess my other idea was to try to put it in the mailboxes, but like those are quite tight too, and they're only like unlockable by the mail person. Yes. So I was thinking of, like putting like a poster in the mail room or on the front door of our lobby or something. Yeah.
I think that sounds like a really good idea. Putting it somewhere where everybody kind of passes by, like at the front door or something, or wherever you feel comfortable. Yeah.
The other thing that I mentioned was like on the Facebook group, I posted that I was concerned that maybe some people in my building didn't speak English, and like maybe we might want to make like a WeChat group or something for Chinese
thinking
speakers,
that too.
and both Chinese speakers. And one of the other people said, yeah, that's a great idea, and he's helping me to translate my notice into Chinese.
Awesome.
And he helped me set up a WeChat chat group. So that was cool.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. Should we? Are there other things people want to talk about? Because I feel like we've covered this guide quite well. I think we are leaving with new information, which is always the whole point of making these videos, that we can illuminate on some new information instead of just, I was going to say regurgitating, information that already exists, but that's kind of what we've just done. But in maybe a more accessible manner. But yeah, any other thoughts, anyone?
One of the things was about setting norms for the pod. Like, what kinds of norms are we talking about here?
They don't actually specify any particular norms. What they do say is that norms can be difficult to maintain when groups start growing. So it's important to have a process to bring people on board, or solid moderation. Consider breaking groups into smaller pods if necessary. And what I had to say about this is that this norms generally are set by folks who are willing to have their voices heard. And part of that is like being honest with each other and ourselves. So people that tend to take up a lot of space, I'm not passing judgment on that, but if you are the kind of person that takes up a lot of space, make sure that you're being honest with yourself and others that you're communicating with, but also please recognize and take a step back and let others take a bit more space. Through these interactions where we're creating an inclusive space for each other, we end up discovering norms. We end up discovering what works and what doesn't. And when things don't work, it's a good idea to assess this whole dynamic that you've got going on. And maybe then at that point you could decide that maybe it's time to break up the pod a little and let folks that maybe adhere to a certain kind of norms go a certain way, and maybe other folks that adhere to a different kind of norm go their own way, but making sure that it's not aggressive, or I just don't want people to like create tribalism within like small pods.
Yeah, well, I think what they were saying is that if you have a small group of people in like the smallest area possible, then it's really easy to maintain the set of norms among the same group of people. But it's kind of like the game of broken telephone, where you get like a pot of like 50, 60, 70 people, within like, I don't know, unless there's a Google Doc where all the norms are written down, but not even everyone will read that or have access to that anyway. That's where things start breaking down. And so that's the importance of breaking your pod up into smaller pods. Once it gets big enough that like it starts being the least bit unmanageable, because ultimately the goal is to have the healthiest people help those who are most vulnerable in the smallest closest units of your neighborhood possible.
Anybody watching, you want to know about norms, Google it, and it will tell you that, hey, this is just how we hang out with each other, and the expectations we have from each other, and the things that we become comfortable doing around each other, and that we accept from each other. These are cultural norms that we've kind of built around that allow us to exist in cohesion with each other. And that world is going to look a lot different after all this is over. So maybe consider building some healthy norms, some inclusive norms that allow space for all kinds of people. And on that note, I think we're going to pass this back to Tèa.
I'm so excited to start seeing more of these happening, and I'm especially excited to get advice from other people and to talk about how we can improve the process of it and support each other as best as possible. And thank you for making this video, because this is exactly what I think we need to be talking about now, is how to be socially connected and socially distant at the same time, and how to take care of people in our communities and do that really hyper locally, because that's more important than ever. So yeah. And also in terms of creating norms, I used to be, I have this weird thing, like a norm for me is if I'm calling somebody, I need to have like a reason to do it. Like, hi, I'm calling you because da da da. And I think that a norm that we can change through this time is like deconstruct the norm that we have to have those reasons. Because I think that telephone calling is going to become so important.
Yes.
In the next little while. So yeah, norms are changing and can change to take care of each other's mental health.
Thank you for mentioning mental health, because that shit is important.
And I wanted to add that mental health is important, and I think that's the one thing we're gonna is the easiest to forget, and we should remember that, and we should remember if that goes, kind of everything goes, because we're talking about organizing and helping others. All of that becomes impossible if our own mental health crumbles. So we should seriously, in the norms, make sure we make sure we're actually taking care of our own mental well-being, so that we can actually do this thing.
All right, and on that note, all this organizing, all this work, it's very important. This is how we win power back for the people. This is how we build power for the people in the future. And we will hopefully be bringing you more useful content, things that you can actually use during this pandemic. And with that, thanks for joining. That's Power to People.